Hello, I'm Letson in for Belva Davis. Welcome to a special edition of This Week in Northern California. With the November election just around the corner, the campaigns are heating up for Propositions 30 and 38. Tonight, we want to cut through the noise and try to make sense of what really is at stake for schools if one or both or neither initiatives get the green light. We'll hear from both sides in just a few minutes, plus get some in-depth analysis from two veteran education reporters. But first, we wanted to see just how bad the budget situation is in our school and how it got that way in the first place. PBS NewsHour correspondent Spencer Michaels takes a look.
What civilization? Mayan.
In schools around the state, there's a feeling that the axe is about to fall. And if and when it does, San Francisco's school superintendent will have to act.
We have our doomsday plan. Part of that is lopping days off of the school year. And it could be up to 10 days next year. That's 2 weeks off of the school year.
Richard Carranza says his district, although well supported by voter-passed bond measures and parcel taxes, has suffered as the state's economy tanked, and along with it, state support.
We are a bare-bones organization, and we're just able to keep the lights on, the doors open, and the teachers in classrooms.
Californians are about to vote on two competing initiatives, 30 and 38. They're both temporary tax increases aimed at funding public schools. Carranza supports Prop 30 and fears that if it fails...
There is no worse scenario. It's DEFCON 5.
From cities to suburbs, the decline in state funding and the slump in property values has hit hard. Since 2007, the per-student spending in California has been cut by more than $1,200, while costs and salaries continue to rise. In schools around the state, like Parkside Intermediate in San Bruno, the budget cuts have affected the classroom.
Anything you know about atomic structure.
8th grade science teacher Amina Bilal says increased class size and lack of funds to upgrade her cramped 1950s-era classroom are affecting her ability to teach.
I crammed 32 students into this small classroom. So can you imagine doing a lab in here? I have 4 chairs to 1 table. With such large class sizes, I'm not able to spend as much time with each student.
California's schools haven't always relied on the state for the bulk of their funding. Until the 1970s, districts raised most of their money through property taxes and bonds. Rich districts flourished, poor and minority districts struggled. Such inequality was ruled illegal by the state Supreme Court. Then in 1978, voters passed Proposition 13, which capped property taxes.
Before Proposition 13, California schools received the largest share of their dollars from local property tax revenues. After Proposition 13 passed, local property tax revenues in the state fell by over 50%.
In response, voters passed Prop 98 in 1988, which guaranteed a minimum funding level for K-12 education. Today, schools get more than half their revenue from the state, with the rest coming from the federal government, property taxes and fees, and other local revenue. But it hasn't completely worked, according to the California Budget Project's Jonathan Kaplan.
Because the state provides a large portion of its budget to schools, when the state experiences revenue shortfalls, when the state goes through a budget crisis, as we've been experiencing, that means is that schools are going to be in the crosshairs.
The result, schools that once were tops in the nation are no longer.
California ranks dead last when it comes to the number of students per teacher. It also ranks dead last when it comes to the number of students per counselor.
One national study now ranks California schools' overall performance 30th in the nation, and it could get worse. If the state doesn't get the additional revenue from tax increases, automatic cuts in the state budget will be triggered.
Approximately $6 billion worth. The lion's share of those cuts are directed at education. $4.8 billion from K-12 education, over $500 million from the state's community colleges, and $250 million each to the University of California and the California State Universities.
And just like the K-12 schools, the state's higher education has already felt the downturn. California's community colleges serve 2.6 million students, the largest higher education system in the country.
It's a beautiful color back here, but that's not...
Schools like Sacramento City College prepare people for vocations like cosmetology or for transferring to a four-year university. But since there isn't enough money, schools like this have had to cut classes and turn away potential students. Bryce Harris was chancellor of the Los Rios district and soon will be state chancellor.
We really have seen about 15,000 students denied access to these colleges just in the Sacramento region. And some estimates statewide show that number to be in excess of 300,000 students.
That has caused the system to essentially ration education and to push students to get their diplomas faster, even if classes aren't available.
They do tend to push you on a little bit more to take a little bit more classes than you actually are capable of. You may get a D or an F in a class and you may not pass it, but you have to take it over again, but they're trying to rush you from getting out of here.
At Santa Monica Community College this past spring, students protested a proposed tuition hike that was designed to reduce admissions in some popular courses. The same money pressures have affected the University of California and the California State University system, where classes are also hard to get, tuition is rising, and maintenance is neglected. Students and faculty fear UC's reputation is in jeopardy.
I think the university is at risk in terms of its quality.
Still, for all the doom and gloom scenarios, there are some Californians who don't think raising taxes, as Propositions 30 and 38 both do, are the solution to the state's education woes.
We have to ask ourselves what throwing money at the problem right now would do. I have to say that I think it would decrease the incentive for material reform in California's education right now.
Carl Brote is a management accountant and treasurer for the group California Parents for Educational Choice. He says until districts address ballooning employee pensions and enact other cost-saving measures, schools will continue to struggle no matter how much per-pupil spending increases.
We aren't doing enough. We aren't thinking creatively about our expenses. We aren't addressing the union contracts. The issue isn't how much we spend, but what we spend it on, and whether we spend it efficiently and in the best way to get the biggest bang for the buck.
An upturn in the state's economy could help the whole situation, but when that occurs and how much it will do remain unclear.
Now that we've seen what's at stake for schools, it's time to break down how Proposition 30 and 38 each propose to bridge the funding gap. Proposition 30, Governor Brown's measure, raises income tax rates on individuals earning more than $250,000 a year and couples who earn more than $500,000 a year. The income tax rate will go up on a sliding scale from 1% increase at the low end to a 3% hike for the highest earners. The tax lasts 7 years. Proposition 30 also raises the state sales tax by 1/4 cent for 4 years. Proposition 38, Molly Munger's measure, increases income tax rates on a sliding scale for almost all Californians, with rates for the lowest earners at 0.4% on up to the highest rate of 2.2% on those making more than $2.5 million. The tax lasts 12 years. You can find even more detail online at KQED's handy proposition guide. Visit kqed.org/thisweek for the link.